Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Yeah? Great. I know you're excited. Can you see me? Because, I'll step over here. I know I'm barely as tall as the monitor there. So my name is Carmen Summers. I'm a senior program manager on the System Center Virtual Machine Manager team. Today I'm going to be talking about Server Fabric Management Lifecycle in VMM 2012. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. How many of you attended part 1 last night with Stephen? Great. Did you guys like what you saw on that? Great. How many of you are using VMM today? Great. Let me ask you a couple questions just so I know who you are. How many of you are using VMware today? Raise your hand, yes. How many of you are using Zen Server? Good, okay. Well, you're going to enjoy this presentation, hopefully. I'm excited about it, so I hope you enjoy it. So you probably saw this slide yesterday, but in VMM 2012, we're making a considerable amount of investments. I will say to you that VMM 2012 is not the VMM that you were used to in the past. But the beauty of it is that you can still manage VMM and your virtualized infrastructure just like you did in VMM 2008. And when you're ready to start enabling some of the features that we've added in that add value for bare metal deployment, for cluster creation, for Hyper-V cluster orchestration, and then once you have your fabric ready, when you start ready to abstracting the cloud, the private cloud for infrastructure as a service. And then on top of that, provisioning applications in a state-contained manner. It's a bit of a paradigm shift than what you're used to deploying applications today, and there'll be a session on that as well. But today, the focus of our presentation is out-of-band management, bare metal deployment, and our multi-hypervisor support for Zen and VMware. And of course, I'm going to talk about agent management, which is encompassing of something we did in 2008, and there haven't been much changes, but there's a bit of look and difference and feel and the UI of where to go to manage the agents, and I'll show you that in a demo. So when you come away from today's presentation, the goal is that you'll have some education about bare metal deployment. You'll understand what we're doing with Zen Server, what we're doing with VMware, what we're doing with Hyper-V, and the differences between those. And then how the ease of what we've done and enabled in this feature set for you, the virtualized administrator, to be able to provision out your virtualized fabric that supports your virtualized services, enables ease of management without going to 5 different consoles. We put it all in one place for you. So in VMM 2008, we kind of said we did host management. We did. But you had to create the host outside of us, and then you had to add it in. And so we took over managing the host properties. You can add it in. We put an agent on there. We monitored the agent status. And we enabled you to deploy virtual machines on it. But in terms of, that's about as far as we went. We didn't give you the ability to provision the host or to create a cluster. And in 2008, 2007, we've always had multiple hypervisor support. In 2007, we kind of only had support for Virtual Server 2008 R2. And let's face it, not a lot of people use that. So we weren't a really value-add prop there. But SCVMM 2008 RTM came along, and we added support for Hyper-V and ESX, and we maintained our support for Virtual Server 2005 R2. In our SP1 that was just recently released this year, we've added support for ESX3 and ESX4 limited. And we also added support for Hyper-V R2 SP1. So the list keeps growing. Now with VMM 2012, we'll be adding support for Hyper-V for ESX3, ESX 4.1, and then Citrix Zen Server. So I would say that from this point, we give you the ability to manage all the different hypervisors you have in your data center to provide you a centralized console that enable you to then do day-to-day operations from those consoles. Yep, there's still going to be things that you have to do on the Citrix Zen server, and there's still going to be things that you have to do in vCenter. But the goal of our cross-platform integration is to enable day-to-day operations through a single pane of glass. So here's kind of what our Virtual Machine Manager 2012 architecture slide looks like. Did you guys see this yesterday? No? Okay. Well, what we have is an abstraction layer. And we've had this since 2008. And what this abstraction layer enables you to do is plug in multiple platforms underneath. So you see here we have the Hyper-V platform, and we had the VMware platform with VMware vCenter layered on top of that. And then we've plugged in Citrix Zen Server hosts and clusters. So what this means to you as an administrator is that if you wrote a script for provisioning out provisioning out a virtual machine in VMM 2008, guess what? That same script will work on VMware and it'll work on Zen. So you don't have to script multiple scripts to support the multi-hypervisor platforms that we have. One script will work in all three platforms. So it's a real cost saver, automation saver to you. And the value is that our entire UI is built on top of PowerShell. So every time you go through a wizard, you don't have to create a script from scratch. Just copy it out, save it in library, modify it to meet your needs. How many of you today create scripts from scratch? How many of you go out on the internet, find what you want, pull it down, bring it in, modify it? Yeah, I thought so. I do that too, because frankly, I can never remember all the commandlets. In VMM 2008, we had 182 commandlets. You know how many we have in VMM 2012? 432. That's a lot of commandlets. So keeping those all in your head, if you're able to do that, you're way better than me. So we've also added some new server roles in VMM 2012, and these server roles support the new features that we've added. In particular to this conversation is WDS, and that enables our bare metal deployment. We've also added support for WSUS, and that enables our Hyper-V patching cluster orchestration, and that will be covered in the session tomorrow that I'll be doing at 4:30 SIM 357. And that'll be cluster, that's part 3 of this series. It'll be on cluster creation, orchestrating the patching of a cluster, and dynamic optimization and power optimization. So once you're done with this 3-part series, you should have all the knowledge you need to be able to build your virtualized fabric in support of VMM 2012 cloud and service features. Why do I keep going backwards? So, ESX management. We did, like I said, we started ESX management in VMM 2008, RTM, and we're making some changes about the way we do it. How many of you manage VMware in VMM today? Okay.
They yell at us.
Huh?
They yell at us if we connect up.
Okay. Well, we're making some key changes that you should know about. In 2008, when you added a VMware environment to us into VMM, we imported the tree structure and we imported all the hosts. People came to us and said, you know, I really don't want you to do that because I want to maybe manage some hosts in VMM and maybe not manage others. So really what I want you to do is establish some sort of integration and then let me pick and choose what hosts I add. So unlike VMM 2000, I'll get the buttons right here in a second, I'm sorry. It's not that hard, there's an F and an R button and, you know. So we integrate, we don't import this tree structure anymore. So now you pick and choose the hosts that you want to add and then you bring them into the host group structure in VMM that you see fit. So we're not making you do something that seemed sort of unnatural because it was a point in time integration. We didn't maintain it. We imported the tree structure from VMware And once that was done, we never synced it. So people asked us to change that, and we listened, and hopefully it's a positive change, and people like that. We've also added support for less privileged accounts in vCenter. In VMM 2008, you had to enable root SSH on all your ESX hosts. People don't like that. They don't want to do that. I see you all shaking your heads. I didn't want to do that. We did have a mechanism to enable less privileged accounts in VMM 2008, but it was with what VMware classified as an experimental. You've seen that in their console where they'll do experimental features. And we developed a process around that to enable less privileged accounts, but it wasn't baked, and they've since removed it. So in this version, we're adding support for less privileged accounts, and I'll talk about how that works here in a second. Oh, see, I'm still not getting it right. Oh. I'm just going to keep my finger on one button, and I'll only choose that one. So with networking, we've added support for vSwitches, both standard and distributed vSwitches, and we've added support for port groups, standard and distributed port groups. So we don't create them. You still create them through vCenter, but we will discover and let you use them. For VMware templates, we also imported VMware templates in 2008. And guess what? People didn't like the way we did that either. And we take feedback, so we've changed it. The way we used to do it in 2008 is we had you make a copy of your template in VMware, and then you were supposed to import that copy of the template into us, and we removed that template. Well, what we find is that people didn't hear that step, or we didn't have enough information to say, hey, when you import this VMware template, we're going to remove it from VMware, which is a bad thing. So we have since enabled support for leaving the VMDK on VMware. We just maintain the metadata inside the VMM database. So when you import a VMware template, we import all the metadata, but the actual VMDK still remains on the VMware side. So what it enables is faster provisioning because we no longer require the storage of that VMware template and the VMDK in our library. We've added some support for VM management. Thinly provisioned virtual disks are now supported in templates and VMs. Excuse me. We've added support for the way that we manage the VMs. We've added support for some of the new VM properties that VMware has introduced on the VMs, and we've added those so that you can also manage those through us. ESX management. We support, obviously, live migration and live storage migration. We have new added support for this VMM transfer types, the network migration to and from the library, and network migration between hosts. So we've dropped our support for SFFT, which was our own custom mechanism to talk to the hosts. Now we use VMware native HTTPS, and so this is the reason why we don't require the enablement of root SSH on the ESX host any longer. We still require root credentials, but you don't have to enable root SSH. So Citrix Zen Server. Like I said, we manage multiple hypervisors. And really, only two. So a number of you are using Zen in this audience. But what we found is that a lot of people are either using all VMware, Hyper-V, but they're evolving. They're evolving into the multiple hypervisors. So we want to get ahead of the game. And so now the three main vendors on the market are supported by us. And what this gives you is really more choice for your Linux guests in addition to what Hyper-V supports. So in particular, we support the para-virtualized guests. This is a guest where the OS kernel is aware that it's being virtualized, and it's able to work with the hypervisor to be very lightweight and can provide performance on systems that don't have hardware-assisted virtualization on the CPU. And Not only that, is that on top of Zen Server, and just like this in VMware, you get some of the VMM value-add features: intelligent placement, dynamic optimization, power optimization. You get all these things when you're managing those platforms through VMM, so they're value-add for you. So let's talk a little bit about how our integration with Zen works. Our integration with VMware, as you know, is built on top of vCenter. We don't talk directly to the ESX hosts. Does anybody know why? Because we can, but we don't get certain functionality that we need. And there's one piece of functionality in particular that customers like that we wouldn't get if we talk directly to the hosts. And do you know what that is? vMotion. The only way that we can get vMotion and enable that, and we cannot remove the vCenter layer, is to use the Web Services API provided by vCenter. So this is a little different in Zen. We've worked with Citrix hand in hand on this. They've been a great partner, and they've developed what we call an integration pack. We don't require the management layer. We talk directly to the Zen server host. And what happens, what you need to do, is you install this integration pack. And this integration pack is a SIM-based management interface for Zen server. Basically, it's the same type of interface we use to communicate with Hyper-V. It uses WSMAN. So it's not the same API, but it's really similar. So once you install the integration pack on each of you, in which you're going to download from Citrix, once you install that, you will then be able to add the hosts into VMM and manage it. So, like I said, we have no dependency on Citrix Zen Server, and this really resonates with customers, with Citrix Zen Center. This really resonates with customers just because they don't want another management layer in their environment. So let's talk a bit about how we do host management. Our models with with Zen Server and VMware is kind of the same. You create the hosts outside of us. You then bring it into VMM. We don't provide you the ability to create hosts in Zen's server or Can you guys still hear me? Okay. We have support for standalone and pooled hosts. Pooled hosts are their version of a cluster. And we enable power control through the BMC if it's capable. And you can do restart. And value-added features that we also enable maintenance mode on the host, which we do that for VMware as well as Hyper-V and Zenser. So you can see that we're trying to be as consistent as possible, but with Zen and VMware, there will be more features, obviously, we're going to talk about things you can do on Hyper-V as compared to these two other platforms. So for storage, all virtual disk repositories are supported that Zen server supports. So iSCSI, NFS, HBA, Storage Link. You can use shared and local. But you must add it outside of VMM. VMM will discover, refresh it, and add it in, and you'll be able to see it. So it sounds like as if I'm saying, well, there's a lot of things you still have to do outside of VMM. Yes, I am. And that is because we can't do everything. So the focus of what our multi-hypervisor integration support is that we try to give you the day-to-day operations. And so the things that you do less commonly, you'll still accomplish in Zen server, on the Zen server or in VMware. In Zen, they have this concept of an ISO repository. And basically, this is based upon a CIFS or NFS share. This is, you must have at least one read-write NFS share or CIFS share to be able for us to place an ISO on. So normally these can be read-only, obviously, but in order for VMM to work with and to be able to use an ISO repository, it must be enabled for read-write. So let's talk a bit about how Zen Server does host networking. It's a little different, and it's a little different from the way we do it in Hyper-V. And we identified early on that there were some key differences between networking about how Zen Server handles it and how VMware does it. In particular, the key difference is where the VLAN tagging takes place. Hyper-V takes place, the VLAN tagging on Hyper-V takes place closer to the virtual NIC. In Zen Server, tagging takes place closer to the physical NIC. So for each VLAN that you create on Zen Server, they create what you call a pseudo NIC. And that's where the VLAN tagging and untagging is done. As a result, what you end up is with the virtual switch on each Zen Server host for each of the VLANs. So this model just doesn't really fit with the way it's done in Hyper-V, in our current model. So with Citrix, we talked about the best way to handle this. And so the solution is what we do is we wrap a single VMM vSwitch around Zen Server switches on a single adapter. So now, inside of VMM, the Zen Server host looks like it has one switch to VMM. So you can see here, you have a different vSwitch for every VLAN that you create. But with VMM, what we do is we create a VMM vSwitch around this so that it looks like one vSwitch. So if you go on the Zen Server, you're still going to see the multiple vSwitches that you've created. So in wrapping up the VMware, the Zen Server management, and talk about some of the key key things that we highlight is the para-virtualized and hyper-virtualized machines are supported. Windows will only run on the hyper-virtualized VMs. VMM will create the hardware-assisted virtualized machines from scratch for you. But the para-virtualized, you'll have to create those and store them into the library and then provision them out. So we do standard VM settings like we do for all of the VMs that we support, all the properties. You can change those, modify them, we maintain them for you. All the VMM granular operational actions are available. We introduced the support for checkpoints. It takes advantage of the new checkpoints enhancements in Zen Server. How many of you are using those in Zen Server? Okay. And like I said, we do the value-added services on top of Zen Server that enable you to use our intelligent placement feature, dynamic optimization, and in power optimization. At this time, dynamic memory is not supported. So let's do a demo on Zen Server. We'll add one in just so you guys can see what it looks like. I'll switch over here. Everybody see that? Oh. I wonder if I should change my resolution real quick. There we go. All right. So everybody's seen the VMM 2012 console? Yes? Okay. So in the Fabric space, which is where you maintain the virtualized Fabric servers and your networking and your storage, you add a resource. And when you're ready to add a Citrix Zen Server host, you simply go in here, and you've already set it up outside of us. It's ready to go, has the integration pack installed. Simply type in the name of the computer. I had one pre-created, cut and pasted, save time. And use a run as account. That's one thing that's new in VMM 2012 that we didn't do in 2008 is we support run as accounts. And I think this is really convenient for administrators because I know I get tired of typing in passwords all the time. So this is a really nice feature, and it's a feature that doesn't get a lot of highlighting, because we always like to focus on the larger features, but this is a really value add for you guys. And then you just pick the host group that you want it added in, and you say add, and it goes out and it discovers it, and from that point, I go in there, and it's a simple wizard. I can go to the jobs view. You can see that it's already adding it in there. I go to the jobs view, and I can monitor the job, and there's not a lot of steps to it. We install an agent. I'm sorry, we don't install an agent. We start communicating with the integration pack, and it's simple as that. After we're done, you can see the Zen server, and it looks like I can go to the properties of it. Down here in the preview pane, it gives you properties for things that are commonly seen by you, that you want quick information on. And it tells you the status of the host is okay. We maintain the state of the host, so we know if we lose connectivity or we're not able to communicate in some way. And you can see all of the settings for it, what's available, how many virtual machines it has running on it, any reserves that you've stated or want to state. Automatically, it will inherit from the parent host group. So if you want to customize for this particular host, you can certainly do that and override the settings. It'll show you any of the virtual networks. Like I said, it combines all of them into a single VMM vSwitch. And then it'll show you any storage that's on that host. Servicing windows is a concept. It's new in VMM 2012. It is a, how can I say this? It is a field that enables a System Center product like System Center Orchestrator to know when your servicing window is and to respect that and make changes. So essentially for us, it's just a property that you can put on the object. But it can be used by like the orchestrator that provides workflow between all the System Center products to kick off jobs in the stated windows. Custom properties are also new. Well, they're not new, but you can actually create custom properties. So we had this in 2008, right? But you couldn't rename the control field. You could only just type in the name of the property that you want to create, and there was no consistency. You couldn't say this name is my data center location, my XY coordinates in the data center. Now you can. You can create a custom tag and put it in here, and it can be available globally so that you can always use it. So that comes in handy. Oh, cancel, so yes. So let's switch back over to the presentation. Oh, wrong one. Our integration with VMware is very similar, except for instead of adding the individual hosts, which you do, the first thing you need to do is add the vCenter. And we establish communication with that, and then you'll go through the add host process. So the first step is to integrate, second step is to add hosts. So Zen server templates, we also support those. We support generalized and customized for Windows VMs only. So generalized obviously means sysprep, customized means that you've customized an OS for that particular machine. You have to install the Citrix tools manually outside of us. The Zen server templates are not used in VMM, but are not used by VMM, but we import them into VMM to create virtual machines. You can create a VMM template from this VM, and then we also, if there's any para-virtualized properties on that particular VM or the VM template, we maintain those. So Hyper-V management. So in VMM 2008, like I said, we did lifecycle management. We manage your host, but you had to do a lot of creation outside of us. Customers said, I don't want to do that. I want you to discover it. I want to do it all from one single pane of glass. I don't use any other product besides yours. Maybe my desktop guys use Configuration Manager, and we've tried to use it for some of the servers or my virtualized Fabric servers, and it really doesn't work for me. Really what I want to do is I want to do everything through VMM. I want you to discover a bare metal host. And after you discover it, I want you to put an OS on it. And in addition to that, I want you to add it as a host. And then I want you to be able to create a cluster. Right? And then after that, I want you to monitor the life cycle of it, make sure it stays up, make sure it's there and working like it's intended. And then someday when I'm ready, I'm going to delete it and get rid of it. Right? So I can honestly say that in VMM 2012, we're doing all this. And it's a very cool thing. Don't you guys think so? Sure. So the key investments in bare metal provisioning are adding support for the out-of-band management, the base management controller. How many of you know what these are? How many of you use them today? Okay, most people just refer to them as, by the vendor, the hardware manufacturer name, DRAC, ILO, right? When people first started saying, oh, we're going to add support for baseboard management controllers, I always thought, what is that initially? Because I always referred to it as a DRAC or an ILO, and I don't really think that, oh, what's the categorization of this particular functionality. The next feature we've added that basically out-of-band management enables is bare metal deployment. And then on top of that is cluster creation, which we fully automate the cluster creation of a Hyper-V cluster only. So this is really centered towards the customized integration, customized deployment, and focused on Hyper-V clusters. And one thing that's missing in here in cluster creation will be covered tomorrow is in SIM 357, I will be doing at 4:30, is that you can also orchestrate the patching of a cluster, and it's fully automated. So no longer do you have to migrate the VMs off, live migrate them, go and patch the node, and then go to the next one. You hit a button and it happens, and it's fully automated. I get excited about that feature. So the out-of-band management, let's talk a bit about that. We do discovery, and it gives you basic level hardware inventory. The SM BIOS GUID, we can get the manufacturer, the model, the asset tag, the serial number, just basic asset inventory. Using this little computer in your box, you can manage the power states. And frankly, it's almost a lifesaver for most sysadmins to have this functionality because most data center admins, if you're in a large-scale data center, I used to be, they didn't allow you on the data center floor without a change ticket. And it took some time to get on the data center floor. Plus, I worked 3,000 miles away, so it would have taken even longer to get on that data center floor. So having these base management, these DRACs and these out-of-band management controllers really enables you to see, when the machine is blue screened or when the OS is not responding. It's really a lifesaver. So you can also have, view a collection of system hardware logs. So when the OS stops responding or there's a hardware level error, you can actually view it in these hardware logs. But the bottom line is that this feature enables more advanced features in VMM, and that's bare metal deployment, dynamic optimization, and power optimization. DO and PO will be covered tomorrow in SIM 357. It's part 3. So there's three protocols that there's two protocols that actually 3 protocols we support and an extensible one. So the first one is, in the box, we support Smash via WS-MAN. Now Smash via WS-MAN, it's actually not used today a lot by most vendors. But we've added support because it is evolving and it is coming around. I just want to make sure. And then the second and third one is for IPMI and DCMI. And these are the ones that most hardware vendors support today. DRAC and ILO both support both of these protocols. For those of you who are using customized or to add support for those that we don't support that aren't covered under this, we give you the ability to create your own configuration provider interface. So if you have a hardware vendor that we don't support, that does not support one of these protocols, you can work with them, or you can create your own custom provider to enable connectivity and communication with the BMC on your particular customized hardware or machine. So now we get into bare metal deployment. Bare metal deployment is simple: the discovery of bare metal machines and bring them into a fully provisioned Hyper-V enabled state. How does it work? How do we do it? So you have a VMM server, and you have a WDS server. You have a bare metal server. And you have a library server, which was going to provide some of the metadata and the components we need and the disk we need to provision out. Basically what happens is we do an out-of-band reboot on the bare metal. This is the provisioning process. And what happens is that out-of-band reboot then contacts the WDS server. And it puts it into, it has to be, the host obviously has to be configured to enable boot from PXE, Pixie boot. So once we boot from PXE, that WDS server first contacts VMM and says, hey, is this Pixie server authorized? Is this host authorized to boot? Is the host that you want to provision in VMM? And if it says yes, we then send down a WinPE image. It's a customized VMM WinPE image. And I'll talk about how we integrate with the WDS server so you understand. And I'm going to take questions at the very end, if that's okay. So once that happens, you can run some custom GCEs. We can configure the partitions. And then we download the VHD. We support native boot from VHD. This is how we do it. We don't lay an OS on the actual hard drive. The OS is all on the VHD. And the way we customize this VHD is through a host profile template. And I'm going to get into host profiles. I'm going to show you how to create one. We also can inject drivers. And you can put those drivers. By default, we'll use plug and play to detect the drivers that are needed. But if there's a driver that's missing, you can put it on your library. You can add it to the host profile, and we'll automatically tag the driver, and we'll automatically pick that up on your behalf. And at that point, we send down the VHD, we download the VHD, we customize it through the settings in the host profile, and then you have a host, a Hyper-V enabled host. So we support the first component in making sure that you can provision out a bare metal machine is to integrate with Windows Deployment Server on Windows Server 2008 R2. We don't support WDS on Windows 2008. There were some new enhancements that were put into R2 that we actually needed to take advantage of, so that is why we only have support for R2. We install an agent on that WDS server. We add it into the VMM console. You can see it. It responds to only, once we add an agent, it can coexist with other providers. So if you are provisioning machines with SCCM as well as VMM, we know that, and we only respond to VMM requests. Now, one thing I do want to say here is some people ask us, well, SCCM does bare metal deployment. Why are you guys doing this? You know, we already have that. And the easiest answer for me to give you is we worked really hard with the SCCM team. We both recognize the value in being able to have one console for basically doing bare metal deployment of your virtualized infrastructure, your fabric servers, and then creating a cluster and then maintaining it. It's very specialized, and in fact, we use some of the same code that SCCM uses. We have worked hand in hand with them to make sure that we're able to coexist and that we don't do anything that messes with the SCCM host provisioning or bare metal provisioning. And so for those of you using both, you can still bare metal provision servers you could even continue to use it for bare metal deployment of your Hyper-V hosts. Unfortunately, it doesn't enable Hyper-V. This is a very customized, specialized way for you to quickly enable your Hyper-V hosts. So we also deploy a WinP image, a customized VMM WinP image to the WDS server that we use for the Pixie boot. So now that you have the WDS server installed and you're integrated with VMM, the next thing you want to do is create a host profile. What the host profile does is enables you to build out a consistent, customized image from a VHD in the library that's generalized, custom sys-prepped. Put some drivers in there. You specify what drivers you want to use in your host profile if you want to, if you need to. Of course, you went to the networking and storage talk yesterday. You add your logical networks into that host profile. You specify your disk partition layout. You specify all the OS settings, and then from that, you have a host profile. We're going to go through this here in a second. How many of you used VMM 2012 beta so far? How many of you have tried bare metal deployment? Okay. So now that we have the host profile created, now we'll go through the add resource wizard. We're going to provision out a host. So the VHD that you use for host provisioning, some people ask me, well, what's the best way to create this image? What's the best way to do this? And so I went and asked Greg Crisanza, who's our PM, who owns this feature, and he says, just create it like you would a normal image. Anything that you put in there must be sys-preppable. So if you're going to put management agents or anything like that, everything you put on the image has to be sys-preppable. Well, how do I know what drivers I need? Because sometimes when you're installing, a server that you just got out of the box, the drivers, they're not always there. You can't do it. So his recommendation is you create the image, the VHD image. You provision it out. And once you're done, you open up the device manager. And if there's anything missing, then that's how you target. Of course, you're testing it out. You're making sure it works, right? You're not doing this the first time in production. And if there's any drivers missing, you'll identify those and specify those as customized drivers. I think for the most part, we do a pretty good job of detecting with PMP the drivers you need and being able to build out make the machine available on the host, the VHD available on the host. But there are times where we may be missing a video driver or something like that. And so that's the way you identify that. And then you'll bake that into the library. You'll bake it into your host profile. And I'll show you how to do that. So after you create the host profile, we're going to go through the add resource wizard. And this add resource wizard, essentially, you discover the resource through out-of-band management. We're going to make some selections. You may have multiple host profiles. And those multiple host profiles may be for static IPs or DHCP IPs, however you want to do and customize your host profile. And you may have ones that are specific to specific hardware vendors. So you select the host profile, you select the host group you want to provision in, and then we're ready to deploy it out. And we go through that deployment process. We're going to do some deployment customization. We're going to specify the computer name, and if you're running a static IP, you'll have to include the MAC address of the management NIC that you're going to use. And I don't know about y'all, but it's hard to get that piece of information because either your hardware vendor provides it or you have to go and get it through the BMC. So, and then if you have multiple NICs enabled, it's like, well, which one is it? So that's a little challenging, but you have to get it right. If you're using a static IP, you have to provide the right MAC address because when we boot up, after we finish provisioning, if we don't have the right one specified, we won't be able to finish out the provisioning process. So the way you can get that is your hardware vendor will provide it. You have to know which NIC you're going to put it on is your management NIC, and most of you probably do already when you're provisioning out, I would imagine. And what's nice is that, and you learned yesterday, is that we create these static IP pools that specify a range, right? And so we will check in, check out on your behalf. So there's no reason to type in. You just create the static IP pools. You bind that to the host profile, say use this IP pool, and we'll automatically check out an IP from that pool for you. So the days of you having to maintain spreadsheets full of IP addresses for check-in, check-out, those are gone. Let's do an OS deployment demo. Okay. Everybody see that okay? I think, sorry about my resolution. They gave me the right settings, and for some reason my machine's not acting right. All right, so let's go about provisioning a host. As you know, provisioning a host, it takes about an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through creating a host profile, and I'm going to kick off the job, and it's going to start running, and then I'm going to show you a completed job because the session will be over and you guys will be off to lunch by the time this finishes. So, all right, let's say the Pixie server. Now in the fabric space, this is your fabric space. Remember in VMM 2008 where you had all your managed computers like your library servers, your VMM server, and you saw those in the settings space, right? We treated the VMM server roles as sort of not part of VMM. We had a different space for them. And so your host would be in the in one workspace, and your managed computers, all your hosts, and everything that we maintain an agent on would be in the settings space under managed computers. And so we've changed that a little bit simply because in the patch feature, we also enable you to patch these VMM server roles. So we needed one centralized space to do patch management from, and that's actually in the compliance view, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. But in this space, we've added all of the servers. So not only can you see your hosts, but you can also see all the role servers in VMM. And when I say a role server, I mean a library server, a WSUS server, which is what we call an update server, a Pixie server, a vCenter server, and the VMM servers themselves, and the library servers. And you can actually see what roles are installed. So you may have a VMM server that has a library server on it that has a bunch of the components. And in this fabric space, you can actually see what role it's running. You can also see, here's the fabric space. I just want to show you the difference between this space and this. These are actually different shows. So the things that you can do, the actions, operations you can perform are actually different in these different views. And some people, it can tend to be a little confusing if somebody hasn't shown you. But once you get it, you're off and running. So in the fabric space, this is where you will do the things that you did in the settings space, update, manage computers, look at the server roles, look at the properties, change the properties on the server roles. And in here you see I've added a Pixie server. This Pixie server essentially has not much metadata to it. It has an agent status. Every time we put an agent on a computer, we refer to it as a managed computer, even though it's performing a role within VMM. Anything that we are managing, it's performing either it's performing a function that supports the virtualized fabric. So it's either a role or a host, one of the two. It's a role, a host is a role as well. And you can see the agent status, and from here, just so that you know, I can also update the agent anytime I want. If there's a new agent you put a hotfix on or a roll-up on, you can check to see if your agent status is update. You can check to see the agent version status. And this is helpful when you're troubleshooting or having host problems. And we all know that you never have host problems or any other type of problems. So it's really unneeded information, but you may never know. That was a joke because I know host responding was an issue in 2008. And there's a lot of KB articles, a lot of blogs, and a lot of hot fixes we've put out to try to rectify that. And I think we've made some vast improvements in 2012. So with this, we have the Pixie server, and it's integrated. Now we've installed an agent on it. We've put our Pixie image on the WDS server. We've configured it so it knows to respond to VMM requests. So let's go and let's provision out a server. Not that one. We don't do that. So you click Hyper-V hosts and clusters. Down here at the bottom, you have a lot of choices. Of course, you can still provision out the hosts outside of us and add them in just like you did in 2008. But down here at the bottom, we want to provision a physical computer. Actually, I'm sorry, I wanted to show you a host profile first, which is the component you need. In the library, we have a bunch of new additions that support all the applications. But in particular to this conversation here, we have these host profiles. And we're going to go about the process of creating a host profile. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a host profile, which is I'm going to name it Test Tech Ed. And I'm going to tell it which image in the library I want it to use. And you see here I have the blank, and these are blank disks. Obviously those were in 2008 as well. I'm going to supply this image, which has been generalized. I just picked it out of our library. I'm going to supply whether this should get a static address or a DHCP address. And so if I say allocate from this particular network, this logical network, I have a VMM demo, and that has an IP pool assigned to it, and it will use one of the IP pools from that. I'm going to have to supply a domain. We'll just type in Redmond, and I'm going to do the run as profile. So I will tell you that we are making some changes to the way we do run as profiles and run as accounts from beta, from feedback we've heard from customers. So this will change. But for right now, this is what we're using. More than likely, it will change to a run as account. You can supply a local admin password. And so I'll just put in a password here. So this is very familiar to you guys, right? I mean, this is just like creating a VM, a lot of the things that we're asking for. The identity, you can put in the identity and the time zone and any run once commands that you want to add. This is also kind of, this is being fixed. This is sort of buggy right now, but we're actually fixing that, so I'm not even going to cover it because it's actually going to change from feedback we've gotten from customers. So I've finished creating my host profile, and you can see it in the library. And so at this point, I have everything I need to start bare metal provisioning. So I'm going to switch over to my Fabric view. I'm going to add some resources. I'm going to pick physical server. I'm going to pick a run as account that I pre-created that I always use. And I'm going to specify the protocol that I want to use. In this case, I have specialized hardware and a specialized out-of-band management controller, and so I created a custom configuration provider for my specialized hardware. But normally, if you don't know what DRAC or ILO supports, you pick DCMI, IPMI. Always pick those two out of the box if you don't know, because most management controllers support those. This is IP subnet, so I'm going to try and discover all the IPs on this particular range. I mean, all the bare metal machines that have BMCs in this particular range. So I'm going to enter the range in here. You can specify a single, you can specify an IP subnet, or you can do it this way and specify a range. So I'm going to click next, and so now it goes out and it discovers basic information about these. That's the SM BIOS GUID, the model, the manufacturer, any serial number data, and we all know that the hardware vendors are, I mean, it's not always consistent with what they supply in this piece of asset information on the out-of-band management. So it's sort of hit and miss. This is the host that I want to provision. I'm going to select it. If I wanted to provision all these at once, I select all of them at once, and it will consistently and simultaneously deploy all those hosts at once. So I'm going to specify the host group I want to put it in, and I don't have any sub-host groups created, so I'm going to put it in all hosts. And then I'm going to specify the host profile that I want to use. So it's going to give me a listing. If I want to use a DHCP address, I'm going to use this host profile. If I have a static one, I could supply the static IP host. And it knows, it can discover, and it reads the object, and it says which one I'm going to use. It's not defined by the name of the host profile. It's actually defined by the characteristics in the object itself. So here's where, if I was doing a static IP, that I would input the MAC address of the management NIC. But because I'm doing DHCP, I don't have to do that. So the only thing I would need to do in this instance is supply a computer name. So test computer. I know that's not data center naming convention. So this is a warning that's actually going to go away, because people think that there's an error when you see this, right? What was your first reaction? Oh, she did something wrong. There was an error, right? So we had some of our TAP customers in a few months ago, and they gave us feedback like, why is this even needed? You know, and basically what we're telling you in this dialogue is make sure you get the MAC address right, or we're not going to be able to finish provisioning. We're going to make it more user-friendly and less invasive, so this will go away. And once I click finish, we'll go out. You see that right here we've already started to create the test computer. We create a test dummy object, so we have a placeholder for the object until it's fully provisioned. So if you go into the jobs view and simply click over, you can see that the first thing we're going to do, and we went through this diagram before, is we're going to go out, we're going to boot that machine. We're going to contact the out-of-band management controller. We're going to boot that machine, so we tell it to Pixie. It's already configured to Pixie boot. It then Pixie boots, and this is kind of, I would say, in my experience, the part where you feel like you don't have any control or any visibility into this process, because it's going out, it's Pixie booting, and you hope that it's working, right? Well, the ideal thing is to bring up your BMC in another window and watch it as it goes, because otherwise you're kind of flying blind here. And in my case, I don't always have access to the BMC because of our test labs in Redmond. And so it's kind of like, well, if it doesn't work, then I have to call the data center guy and have him look at it. Why didn't it succeed? Why didn't it Pixie boot? So this is kind of like the process, the part of the provisioning process that I feel like takes the longest and is probably the most risky, that I think that maybe in the future we could provide some improvements on. And I will say is, if you're going out and you're doing testing on VMM 2012 and you're coming across this, and you're coming across any things that you think can use improvements, we take your feedback on Connect. And you can give us your feedback and we will take it. And I will tell you that every single bug or DCR that you put in our Connect database goes directly into the product team, and we evaluate it. And we hopefully, 9 times out of 10, provide you responses to your suggestion or your bug or what the resolution of it was. And I will say that if you don't get that feedback, you should tell me directly, because I own that. And we should be providing you take the time to test for us, we should be taking the time to provide you feedback. So it may not be always what you want to hear, but we will give you some feedback. So this is going to go out and it's going to finish doing what it does, which is provisioning out a bare metal host. You can see here, I'll show you that I completed one the other day. See, all the jobs are in here. Like when I discovered the bare metal, when I discovered it, and it's refreshing the virtual machine, creating the host profile. All these things are logged in our job log. And so you can always find information on create new host cluster. I don't know why it's refresh, create new host profile. Discover. Sorry, I just want to add virtual machine host. Discover their nodes. Yeah, I don't. Oh, create new host cluster. I don't know why I can't find the job. Maybe because I have my filter on. In VMM 2012, you can actually filter, like we used to filter by type in VMM 2008. We actually put the filtering capability within the columns now. So you can actually filter on the columns and filter your view in that. And that's a lot of times we get that feedback from customers, like, where did the filtering go? It was so easy to find, and now it can't be found. So just so you know, that's where it is. Add virtual machine host. I think this is the one. Details. Now, create new host cluster. So there should be a lot of jobs logged in here, but essentially we're running through the process just like we did. We see we're still waiting for the machine to Pixie boot. It's going to take some time, and after that, like I said, we will, once we respond, VMM responds, we'll send down the image, we'll send down any custom drivers that we have. Here's where you would define the custom drivers. So essentially the process to get drivers into the library is exactly like you drop any other object into our library. We recommend that you create a folder on the library share called drivers. You don't have to do this, but you really should. Create a folder called drivers. then for each driver that you have, whether it's a video driver or a network, you download the specific driver in your creator folder for that. Then at that point you put the driver in there. So VMM will then go out and discover there's an INF file associated with that driver. We know about that. We're intelligent enough to discover it, pick it up, and we'll bring it in and we'll recognize what the driver is. Just to keep the drivers organized properly, and we recommend that you don't mix the driver folders with any other objects you drop in the library, because the entity of the folder, if you delete that driver, we will delete the folder it lives in. So it's sort of like, don't mix your drivers and your ISOs, and create some organizational structure on your library shares to be able to handle this. I think that maybe it's a workaround for it to compensate for something we're not doing, being able to mix and just put anything there. But typically, system administrators, you guys organize in files and folders, and just so that you have the organizational parts that you need on file servers. I mean, that's why the folders are there, right? So that's where you drop them in. And then in the host profile, if you're using custom drivers, and I didn't show you this before, but I do think it's important to show you, go into the properties. I can add custom drivers anytime I want. Where are my drivers? Host settings. Let me go into this. Hardware configuration. Oh, driver tags. They're down here at the bottom. And if I see this one, I'm using a custom driver. So basically what I would do is I would select the new tag, and I would tag the drivers in the library with this specific tag, video or whatever, so that when this host profile is used, it will go out and look for the driver in the library that's tagged with whatever you told us to tag it with, and use that explicitly always on that particular host you're provisioning. So let's switch back over. I'm pretty much wrapping it up, and I'm going to take some questions. But before I do that, I wanted to go over, hopefully by now you understand how to bare metal provision. You understand our integration with Zen Server and VMware. And you understand how we're enabling, while we're doing some features that are done in other products like SCCM, we are enabling the guys who manage the virtualized infrastructure to have a complete console where they can bare metal provision, create, and so really bring that value add. And so you don't have to move between consoles or products for that matter. Everything in our system is on demand. You can say do it now, whereas in some systems you have to wait for the feedback. You get visual responses within VMM 2008. It's one of my favorite things. In some other products, you click on an operation and you're kind of like, what's happening, what's going on? Our jobs view doesn't allow that. We give you step-by-step pieces of information to allow you to track the progress of a job. We have what's called a community evaluation program. I think Stephen went over this yesterday. I am the community PM for System Center Virtual Machine Manager, and I will say that our product doesn't get better without your testing and your support. So bottom line is, if you haven't downloaded VMM 2012 beta, please go out there, please do it, please test. We are in active bug fix mode right now. So this is an evaluation program for those who want to have a step-by-step guided tour or with homework assignments through the product. This is actually going to be done by the product managers, the program managers that actually created the features. So myself and 15 other people on my team will be doing the guided tours through these. And you'll have homework assignments. There'll be a community forum that supports you so you can ask questions. So I think that for those people who are just interested in learning about the product and spend the time, it's once every 2 weeks. It's about an hour total, hour and a half. And you really get a lot of value add. And you get to talk to the people who created these features, which I think is always enables you more insight than most people would normally get. And then the related session, the part 3 of this server fabric lifecycle, is cluster creation and update management, and I'll be doing that tomorrow at 4:30. And let's see, Chaitanya, who is also on my team, will be doing setup, deployment, and upgrade today at 5 o'clock. And then we'll be doing the cluster, not the cluster creation, but the service life cycle for the service creation feature, and that'll be modeling and maintaining virtualized applications, and Stephen Barron will be doing that. And I think it is today or today at 3 o'clock. And if you attend, I really recommend you attend that because it really tells you how we create services in VMM 2012. Are there any questions? Did you guys have a good time today? Okay, good.